Hear my thoughts on all the things that took place at Super Bowl LVIII over this week on JG9 News. New content dropping every single day on that channel. And now, on with our feature presentation. Well, that was nuts. I'm not gonna lie. Most of this season has not been very good. It's been marred with poor quality of play, dumb coaching decisions, primetime games that were not very good to watch, and some absolutely shambolic officiating at times that makes you wonder whether you're even watching the same sport as the officials. After Wildcard Weekend, where you had a grand total of one good game out of 6, a lot of people were talking about this as one of the worst seasons of all time. But all of that is going to be forgotten about. As time progresses, all of that will be forgotten, because the way the season ended, with 6 straight games decided by one possession, and a Super Bowl for the ages, has made up for it. Even this Super Bowl felt weirdly symbolic of the season. Bad for a decent amount, and very sloppy, and not a very exciting thing to watch. And then, the ending rolls around, and it becomes an absolute thriller. With the Kansas City Chiefs defeating the San Francisco 49ers 25-22 in just the second overtime Super Bowl of all time, and in the longest Super Bowl ever played, with the game just one play away from going into double overtime, a lot about NFL history has been cemented. The Chiefs are officially a dynasty, with their 3rd title in 5 years. Patrick Mahomes has officially entered the greatest of all time discussion with his 3rd Super Bowl MVP. And Kyle Shanahan, who has now coached his 3rd Super Bowl in some capacity with a loss after being up by double digits, has to be seriously questioned about his game plan, especially with the lack of usage for Christian McCaffrey at times, and the questionable decisions in not even trying to get the ball back at the end of the first half. Still, this scheme was an all-time classic that is going to go down as one of the greatest Super Bowls of all time. But even though this scheme will live on as its own unique thing, we've sort of seen this scheme already before. Because was it just me? Or did this scheme remind anyone else of Super Bowl XXIII 35 years before, in a game that, coincidentally, also happened to involve the San Francisco 49ers? Remember this game? Where the San Francisco 49ers beat the Cincinnati Bengals by a final score of 20-16? It was a game that felt extremely similar to this Super Bowl. A super low-scoring affair at the start that I'm not sure anyone expected. A pretty boring and sloppy contest. And then, the end of the game happened, and all hell broke loose. But it got me to thinking, what else about this game felt similar? Because you're not going to believe the striking similarities between these two games played 35 years apart from each other, to the point where you would think that the NFL scriptwriters just got lazy and decided to reuse previous scripts. I've done this before. I talked about how last year's Super Bowl was identical to that of Super Bowl XXXVIII between the New England Patriots and the Carolina Panthers, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. I talked about how Super Bowl LVI was identical to that of, oddly enough, also Super Bowl XXIII, because the NFL really seems to love using that script for some reason, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And I talked about how Super Bowl LV was identical to that of Super Bowl XVIII, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. So, in what's become an annual tradition on the channel, let's compare the two Super Bowls, with the similarities getting more and more insane as we go on. For starters, at Super Bowl LVIII, the Kansas City Chiefs won their 3rd title since the NFL-AFL merger. Yes, they won Super Bowl IV, but that was in the pre-merger era, and was the last Super Bowl held with the NFL and AFL being split into 2 separate leagues. For the Chiefs, not only was this their 3rd title in the post-merger era, but the first one came against the San Francisco 49ers at Super Bowl LIV, as in, the team that was their opponent in this scheme. And of the 3 titles, one of them took place in Miami, which was Super Bowl LIV, one of them took place in a state that had previously hosted the Super Bowl, which was Arizona at Super Bowl LVII, and one of them took place in a state that had never hosted the Super Bowl before, which was Nevada at Super Bowl LVIII. For the 49ers at Super Bowl XXIII, that was their 3rd title since the merger. Not only was this their 3rd title in the post-merger era, but the first one came against the Cincinnati Bengals at Super Bowl XVI, as in, the team that was their opponent in this scheme. And of the 3 titles, one of them took place in Miami, which was Super Bowl XXIII. One of them took place in a state that had previously hosted the Super Bowl, which was California at Super Bowl XIX, and one of them took place in a state that had never hosted a Super Bowl before, which was Michigan at Super Bowl XVI. So the same exact makeup. I should also note that prior to the 49ers winning Super Bowl XXIII, the most recent team not named San Francisco to win the Super Bowl was Washington, who won their second Super Bowl ever by defeating the Denver Broncos, who would fall to 0-3 in the Super Bowl lifetime in a game played in California. Prior to the Chiefs winning Super Bowl LVIII, the most recent team not named Kansas City to win the Super Bowl was the Los Angeles Rams at Super Bowl LVI, who won their second Super Bowl ever by defeating the Cincinnati Bengals, who would fall to 0-3 in the Super Bowl in a game played in California. You can't make this stuff up. The makeup of the teams playing in the games were awfully similar. At Super Bowl XXIII, in one corner, you have the San Francisco 49ers, the winner of the game. The 49ers won the West, but they didn't look great while doing so, as they finished the season with 6 losses. Still, they were able to make it to the Super Bowl after winning in the divisional round against the Minnesota Vikings, a team that was 0-4 lifetime in the Super Bowl, and after going on the road to defeat the Chicago Bears in the NFC Championship, a team that was undefeated and had never lost a Super Bowl. In the other corner, you have the Cincinnati Bengals, the loser of the game. The Bengals got there by being the number 1 seed in the conference, winning 12 games, and by winning in the conference championship against the Buffalo Bills, a team that had never made it to the Super Bowl before. At Super Bowl LVIII, in one corner, you had the Kansas City Chiefs, the winner of the game. The Chiefs won the West, but they didn't look great while doing so, as they finished the season with 6 losses. Still, they were able to make it to the Super Bowl after winning in the divisional round against the Buffalo Bills, a team that was 0-4 lifetime in the Super Bowl, and after going on the road to defeat the Baltimore Ravens in the AFC Championship, a team that was undefeated and had never lost a Super Bowl. In the other corner, you have the San Francisco 49ers, the loser of the game. The 49ers got there by being the number 1 seed in the conference, winning 12 games, and by winning in the conference championship against the Detroit Lions, a team that had never made it to the Super Bowl before. Sounds awfully similar, doesn't it? Well, that's just the historical background of the game. Just wait until we get to what actually took place on the field, because oh man, it is insane. At Super Bowl XXIII, the win gave Joe Montana his 3rd title as the 49ers quarterback, and gave Bill Walsh his 3rd title as the 49ers head coach. At Super Bowl LVIII, the win gave Patrick Mahomes his 3rd title as the Chiefs quarterback, and gave Andy Reid his 3rd title as the Chiefs head coach. At Super Bowl XXIII, the 49ers won the game, but that didn't mean that Joe Montana didn't feel pressure, as he was sacked 3 times over the course of the contest. At Super Bowl LVIII, the Chiefs won the game, but that didn't mean that Patrick Mahomes didn't feel pressure, as he was sacked, you guessed it, 3 times over the course of the contest. At Super Bowl XXIII, when the 49ers won the game, they did so by attempting 4 field goals. At Super Bowl LVIII, the Chiefs won the game, and they did so by attempting 4 field goals. At Super Bowl XXIII, the 49ers scored 2 touchdowns, and both of them were scored through the air, being caught by guys who had the same first letter of their first name. Seriously, Jerry Rice caught the first touchdown, and John Taylor caught the second, so they both started with the letter J. At Super Bowl LVIII, the Chiefs scored 2 touchdowns, and both of them were scored through the air, being caught by guys who had the same first letter of their first name. Marquez Valdes-Scantling caught the first touchdown, and Mecole Hardman caught the second, so they both started with the letter M. Which raises the question, what did the losing team do in both of these games? Well, this is where it gets absurd. The Bengals lost Super Bowl XXIII partly because of an ineffective ground game. The leading rusher on the team was Ickey Woods, who had 79 yards, and the longest run of the day for Cincy was 11 yards. The 49ers, on the other hand, lost Super Bowl LVIII partly because of an ineffective ground game. The leading rusher on the team was Christian McCaffrey, who had 80 yards, and the longest run of the day for San Francisco was 11 yards. So the longest runs were exactly the same, and the leading rushers in terms of yardage were just 1 yard off. Still, despite the loss, both teams found the end zone. At Super Bowl XXIII, All of the touchdowns scored involved a man by the name of Stanford Jennings. And at Super Bowl LVIII, all the touchdowns scored, with one passing and one receiving, involved a man by the name of Jawan Jennings. Seriously, the loser in both of these games feature 100% of their touchdowns coming from a man with the last name Jennings. You could not script it any better if you tried. Oh, and I should also note that in both games, the losing team actually had more time of possession, which is kind of rare, and the winning team put the ball on the ground way more often than the losing team. But then, we get even more in the weeds of the game itself. At halftime of Super Bowl XXIII, the 49ers, who ended up winning the game, were struggling offensively and only had 3 points. At halftime of Super Bowl LVIII, the Chiefs, who ended up winning the game, were struggling offensively and only had 3 points. It should have been a warning sign in both games that this was going to start off relatively slowly. The very first drive of Super Bowl XXIII ended after Joe Montana fumbled the football. The very first drive of Super Bowl LVIII, well, that ended after Christian McCaffrey fumbled the football. So in both Super Bowls, the first drive of the game resulted in some butterfingers. In both games, the end of the first half was identical when it came to the losers. At Super Bowl XXIII, the Bengals got points on their second-to-last drive, before getting the ball back to end the half and just running out the clock on one play. At Super Bowl LVIII, the 49ers got points on their second-to-last drive, before getting the ball back to end the half and just running out the clock on one play. At one point in the fourth quarter at Super Bowl XXIII, the 49ers found themselves on the ropes, trailing the Bengals by a score of 16-13, although we know that the Niners would eventually win the game. Well, at one point in the fourth quarter at Super Bowl LVIII, the Chiefs found themselves on the ropes, trailing the 49ers by a final score of, you guessed it, 16-13, although we know that the Chiefs would eventually win the game. Same exact scoreline in the fourth quarter in both games, and the winning team had 3 points at the end of the first half in both games. Scary stuff. And then, we get to the end of the game. Oh man, the end of the game. Because that's what both of these Super Bowls are going to be remembered for in the grand scheme of things. How they ended. At Super Bowl XXIII, with the 49ers trailing by 3 points, they drove the length of the field to score the game-winning touchdown, on a drive that started with their running back, Roger Craig, touching the ball, and on a drive that ended with one-time Pro Bowler at the time, John Taylor, scoring. By the time the new league year commenced, John Taylor was 26 years old. At Super Bowl LVIII, with the Chiefs trailing by 3 points, they drove the length of the field to score the game-winning touchdown, on a drive that started with running back, Isaiah Pacheco, touching the ball, and on a drive that ended with one-time Pro Bowler Mecole Hardman scoring. By the time the new league year commences, Mecole Hardman will be, you guessed it, 26 years old. As for the final score of each game, the 49ers touchdown with under 1 minute left in the period at Super Bowl XXIII put them up by 3 points and gave them the win, while the Chiefs touchdown with under 1 minute left in the period put them up by 3 points and gave them the win. So just to recap everything, the win for each team gave them their third Super Bowl title in the post-merger era, and their second against that specific opponent. The losing team only found the end zone in both games thanks to a guy named Jennings. The winning team had their quarterback and head coach win their third titles ever. The winning quarterback, who won its third title ever, threw 2 touchdown passes, with the final one coming to a guy who would be 26 years old by the time the new league year commenced a month later. The winning team only scored 3 points by the end of the first half and was down 16-13 at one point in the fourth before embarking on a game-winning drive down by 3 points. And the winning team did this without having their best season during the regular season, having 6 losses and facing a 12-win team in the big game. When they say that history repeats itself, I guess this is what they mean. Because when you really break it down, Super Bowl XXIII and Super Bowl LVIII were identical. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.